Competition is isolation. The act of improvement is a lonely path, and the act of trying to improve and beat somebody in any competitive endeavor, even if it's not taken at a competitive level and is perhaps more casually enjoyed, means that you tend to look at your opponent or opponents as antagonistic to you. You are the hero protagonist, and they are the vile villain antagonist who is seeking to stop you from your objective. That objective being, of course, to win the game. And this is actually very prevalent among people who call themselves gamers or that would identify as individuals who play a lot of and a large number of hours in video games. People who are gamers follow rules very strictly. They just don't realize that they do, but it's an implication of the system. Whereas in a board game, the rules will be written down on a sheet of paper for all players to read. Things tend to be more complex in video games, especially as the years have advanced. Rules in video games tend to be represented by game mechanics. If this unit touches the spike, this unit will die immediately, let's say in a Mario game. Or if this unit tries to move from here to here, it takes a certain amount of time to do it because the unit's movement speed is not instantaneous, to bring it back to Littlewargame as an example. So people who play games also tend to enjoy the hardness of the rules, or the value of the hardness of the rules is explicated to be a positive, and is in fact something that people commonly need to get over when they are on this path of self-improvement. That is to say, individuals who follow only the hard rules of the game, don't cheat, the unit can only move this far, the unit dies or has these properties or these interesting sub-quirks that you wouldn't think would happen, but it does happen. They tend to do better than people who try to follow the social or soft policies of the game, such as, hey, this would be a really strong tactic and it would probably destroy me, but could you do me a favor and not do insert overpowering tactic? Because for most people who identify as gamers or play these video games, the purpose of playing the game is to win. And what's interesting about Invincible's little football map is that this is not actually the case. It does appear to be so on the surface. We have all of the makings of a facsimile of a sport. You have offensive and defensive lines, and there's a football field that stretches out in increments of 10 yards. There's a down counter that allows players to check whether or not a certain number of downs have happened, over which an individual will then swap their team out from offense to defense, as the case may be, or vice versa, if need be. There's even a line of scrimmage. However, what's important about Little Football Game is that it even explicitly asks you at the beginning of the description, don't cheat. Now that's a very curious thing for a mod to ask, but let's get into some of the things that are almost soft rules that would be explicated or be hard rules elsewhere. So for instance, in the game of football, the actual game of football, there's a rule made by the referee. Referees enforce the rules, stopping individuals from going over the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped. For those who don't know what that means, in American football, the ball has to get off of the starting line, essentially, before either team can make any more complex maneuvers and start the play clock. In Littlewargame's Little Football Game made by Invincible, there is a start timer. However, how do you know if your opponent is ready or not? Okay, how do you know if you have a dispute in a call? Did you intercept the ball? Was the ball dropped? Was it an incomplete pass? Did an individual start with units across the line that they should have, which would necessitate a penalty? Do you really want the game to work on the real-life football game that you have 4 downs to go, 10 in-game yards? Do you want that number to be larger or smaller? Speaking of which, let's say you're successful and you get all the way to the end. How many points is a touchdown worth? Does the game end at the 15 points that are delineated inside of the mod? Well, yes, but a player has to go ahead and add them. What's to stop a player from simply adding all of their points up to 15 immediately? And what you find out is that despite the fact that the game of football has hard rules that are strictly enforced, the little football map does not explicitly hold your hand and force these rules to be the case. Players can't cheat one another. And in fact, it requires a collaborative effort, this social dynamic. And because there is so much that has to be done and taken into account in this mod, that it's almost impossible, regardless of your typing speed, to communicate all of it by typing. It would be very frustrating and perhaps slow, even if you type as I do at 100, 110, 120 words a minute. It's just not feasible for individuals to do that. And what if they're on teams? What if there are disagreements? The chat can easily be flooded very quickly, and so players naturally gravitate in this mod to playing on voice channels, to going into the Discord and taking either opposing sides or just playing the game together with other people. And in fact, they'll sit inside of the same, I've seen this myself, sit inside the same voice chat channel so that everyone can talk about what their disagreements are and whether it goes here or there or who's in charge of what role. And you find out that as soon as individuals are working together to plug in the point at which there should be hard rules, but the hard rules don't successfully govern the fullness of the experience, that players go from being antagonistic to one another towards being collaborators, towards being people who are building an experience together. And what makes this mod unique, to sum it up, is that in a game that's all about beating your opponent, this game and this mod makes it feel like you can win even if you lose.